My mother raised her glass at my brother's graduation party. She looked past me like I was part of the folding chairs. Then she said it loud enough for the whole backyard to hear. "Don't worry about the house, sweetheart. That's already going to someone who actually needs it." 40 people heard her say it. Nobody looked at me. They took a plate of pulled pork instead. They took a slice of sheet cake with blue icing. They took a second beer from the cooler. Derek raised his glass back at her. He grinned like a man who already had the deed folded in his back pocket. I did not put my glass down hard. I did not say a word. I refilled my aunt's lemonade instead. That was the job I had been doing in that family since I was 9 years old. Here is what none of them saw. A plain tin recipe box was sitting in my apartment, 2 miles away. My grandmother had pressed it into my hands 8 months before she died. She told me not to open it, not until somebody in this family called me a guest in my own home. My mother had just done exactly that, in front of 40 people, and a sheet cake. 11 months later, that same backyard would fill up again, for my brother's franchise reopening this time, with a bank underwriter's letter on a folding table. A quiet old man would stand up near the fence. He'd be holding a folded county record. My name would be typed on the grantee line. My mother's glass would still be raised in the air when it happened. It would just never make it back down to the table. But first, there was the graduation party, and the cake, and the lemonade pitcher going warm in my hand. My name is Renee Ashcroft. I was 29 that summer. I worked in the billing office at St. Barnabas Hospital in a Kentucky town called Ashford Mills. About 6,000 people live there. The Barlow River bends past the courthouse. There's a diner that served the same meatloaf special since before I was born. I did not raise my voice. I did not grovel. I just kept refilling glasses. I did the math nobody else in that family had bothered to do in years. I want to tell you about the 2 years before that party. They matter more than the party does. My grandmother, Dot Ashcroft, lived 11 miles outside town, on Coventry Lane. My grandfather built that brick 2-story house with his own hands back in 1961. She had a bad hip and a worse heart. For the last 2 years of her life, I drove her to every single appointment. Cardiology on Tuesdays, physical therapy on Thursdays, the pharmacy on Union Street, whenever her prescriptions changed. That was often. My mother, Carol, lived 20 minutes away. She visited when it suited her. My brother, Derek, lived 40 minutes north in Lexington. He was running an HVAC franchise he'd opened 3 years earlier. He visited Dot maybe 4 times in those 2 years. Always under an hour, always with his phone in his hand. I am good at my job. I want to say that plainly because it matters later. At St. Barnabas, I catch billing errors. The kind insurance companies count on nobody catching. Duplicate charges, miscoded procedures. A supplies fee billed twice because 2 departments both submitted it. I flag maybe 6 or 7 of these a week. I do it calm. I do it in writing. A verbal complaint gets ignored. A written one gets a case number. The week before Dot's funeral, my supervisor pulled up a chart. There was a $412 duplicate charge sitting right in the middle of it. She'd missed it twice. I found it in 90 seconds. I told her flat, 4 sentences, no drama. This line's billed twice. Same procedure, same date, different code. It needs a credit memo. I can process it if you want. She looked almost embarrassed. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I was just telling her where the wrong number was. That's the thing about me people never understood. I don't argue. I just find the line that's wrong. Dot noticed that about me a long time before anyone else did. She used to sit at her kitchen table on Coventry Lane, sorting mail into 3 piles, bills in one, church newsletters in another, and everything else, mostly Derek's, in a pile she called "Read Later" and never did. One Tuesday, in the spring before she died, she pushed a small tin recipe box across the table at me. It had a faded rooster painted on the lid, a dent in one corner, from being dropped sometime in the 70s. "Take this home," she said. "Put it somewhere safe. Don't open it. Dot. What is it?" "It's insurance," she said, and went back to her mail. Like that settled the matter. I asked her twice more over the following weeks. Same non-answer both times, except once, in June. She looked up from the church newsletter pile and said, out of nowhere, "The house is settled, honey. Don't let anybody rush you into anything about that house." Then she asked me if I wanted iced tea, like she hadn't said anything at all. I didn't know what she meant. I filed it away, the way I file away a strange code on an insurance form, something that doesn't make sense yet, but will. Dot died in early March, in hospice, with the windows open. Derek and my mother were both in the room. I held her hand until the very end. It was peaceful. It was quiet. I am not going to describe more of it than that. Some things you keep for yourself. What I will tell you is what happened in the 6 weeks after. Nobody mentioned Coventry Lane to me. Not once. My mother and Derek talked about the house at the funeral reception. In the kitchen, low voices. They thought I was in the other room checking on the coffee urn. I heard enough. "It has to go to Derek," my mother said. "He needs it more than she does." My father, Gary, said something I couldn't make out. "I'm not asking," Derek said. "I'm telling you, it has to be him." I set the coffee tray down on the counter. I walked back out to the guests. I did not say a word. I did not yet have anything to say that would matter. 3 weeks later, my mother handed me an envelope at her front door. $300 inside, in 20s, folded once. "For gas," she said. "For all those years driving her around. We appreciate it." She said it the way you'd tip a delivery driver. I said thank you. I took the money. I did not argue. Arguing with my mother is like arguing with a closed door. You can knock all day. The door doesn't care. That was April. The graduation party was July. For my nephew, Derek's oldest boy, finishing high school. 40 people in Carol and Gary's backyard. String lights over the patio. A sheet cake with blue icing that said, "Congrats, Tyler," letters slightly too big for the cake. That's where my mother raised her glass and told the whole backyard the house was already going to someone who needed it more than me. I refilled my aunt's lemonade. I did the math nobody else was doing. And 2 miles away, in a kitchen drawer, sat a rooster-lidded tin box. Out of respect for a woman who was gone, I still had not opened it. Not yet. Let me tell you about my family before that summer. You need to understand the shape of it. My father, Gary, worked 31 years at a machine parts plant outside town. It closed in 2019. He took an early pension, smaller than anyone in the family liked to say out loud. My mother, Carol, worked part-time at a dentist's office, full-time at making sure everyone knew exactly how things were supposed to go. Derek was the plan. Derek had always been the plan. Derek got a car for his 16th birthday, a used Honda, but new to him. I got a bus pass and a part-time job at a drugstore the same year. Derek got help with his first apartment deposit. I moved into a studio over a laundromat. I learned to live on rice and canned beans for 2 years, finishing my associate's degree at night. I'm not telling you this to complain. I'm telling you because it's the ledger, and the ledger matters later. Derek opened his HVAC franchise, Ashcroft Air Solutions, 3 years before that graduation party. $41,000, scraped together by our parents. Some of it their savings, some of it a home equity loan against their own house, a loan they never once mentioned to me. I found that out much later, from a document. That's how I find out most things in this family. From a document, not a person's mouth. The franchise struggled from year one. HVAC is a brutal business if you don't have the volume. Derek didn't have the volume. 2 trucks, 3 employees, and a habit of buying new equipment before he'd paid off the old equipment. By the time of that graduation party, Ashcroft Air Solutions owed $118,000 across 2 business loans and a line of credit. Derek had stopped telling our parents the real number months earlier. Carol and Gary knew some of it, not all of it, enough to be scared. Being scared made them protective in exactly the wrong direction. If Derek's business failed, their home equity loan would come due, in a way they couldn't cover on a pension and a part-time dental office paycheck. So when Derek came to them in May, he said he needed the Coventry Lane house. Needed it as collateral for a bridge loan to keep the franchise breathing another 18 months. My mother didn't ask one question. She didn't ask whether the house was even legally his to offer. She just said yes. Saying no meant admitting how bad it already was. I didn't know any of this in July. I only knew the shape of it. The way you know a storm is coming from the color of the sky before you check the forecast. My mother's line at the party wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was fear, wearing cruelty's clothes. I understand that now. I understood some of it even then. It didn't make the lemonade pitcher any lighter in my hand. I want to describe one more thing about that party. It matters. Near the fence by the crepe myrtle bushes stood an older man in a short-sleeved button shirt, refilling his lemonade from the same pitcher I was carrying. I didn't know him. Nobody introduced him. Maybe 70 years old. Silver hair combed back. Reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He watched my mother make her toast with an expression I couldn't place at the time. Not shock. Not amusement. Something more like a man watching someone step toward a hole in the sidewalk. A hole they don't know is there. I refilled his glass. He thanked me by name, which struck me as odd since I'd never met him. "You're Dot's granddaughter," he said. "The one who drove her around." "Yes, sir." "She talked about you," he said, and went back to his lemonade. I didn't think about him again for 11 months. His name, I would learn much later, was Owen Castellano. He was the Barlow County recorder, had been for over 20 years. He had personally processed a deed with my grandmother 9 years earlier, a deed nobody else in my family knew existed. That night, after the party, I drove home with the windows down, radio off. When I got to my apartment, I opened the kitchen drawer. I looked at the rooster tin for a long moment. Then I closed the drawer again. Not yet. I want to be specific about the following weeks. Specifics are the only thing that ever convinced anyone of anything in my family. In late July, 3 weeks after the graduation party, my mother called me. A Tuesday evening. I remember it was a Tuesday because Tuesdays were cardiology days with Dot for 2 years. Some habits of the calendar don't leave you just because the person is gone. "I want to be upfront with you," Carol said. In our family, that usually meant the opposite was coming. The house on Coventry Lane. It's going to Derek. His business needs it. You understand, don't you? You've got your apartment. You've got your job. You don't need a whole house sitting empty. "I understand," I said. "You're not upset." "I'm not upset," I said. And I wasn't lying. Not exactly. I was something quieter than upset. I was doing math. "Good," she said, "because it's already decided. Your father and I talked to a lawyer. It's Derek's." I asked her, evenly, "What lawyer?" "Does it matter?" she said. "Renee, don't make this complicated. You were never really going to be the one who kept that house. You know that." I said okay, the way I say okay to an insurance adjuster who is wrong. Not worth arguing with over the phone. You save your fight for the paperwork, not the conversation. I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I opened the drawer. I took out the tin box, and I opened it. Inside was a manila envelope, folded once to fit. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, a recorded deed from the Barlow County Recorder's Office, dated 9 years earlier, transferring the Coventry Lane property from Dorothy Ashcroft to Renee Marie Ashcroft, reserving a life estate. Under the deed, folded separately, was a handwritten letter, on the same stationery used for her church newsletters. Renee, if you're reading this, somebody finally said the quiet part out loud. The house was never the gift, honey. Being the one I trusted was. I did this 9 years ago because I watched how your mother counts things. I knew someday she'd count you out of a house that was never going to be hers to give away. Go see Owen Castellano at the recorder's office. He's had the paper the whole time. Don't yell. You were never a yeller. Just go get it in writing like you always do. I sat at that table until midnight. I did not cry, not really. Just a few tears that came and went without asking permission. Mostly I felt relief, mixed with a kind of low, cold anger. I didn't have a place to put it yet. The next morning I called in a half day. I drove to Union Street. The Barlow County Recorder's Office sits in a squat limestone building, 2 blocks from the diner, between the courthouse and a shuttered 5 and dime, empty since before I was born. Owen Castellano's office was on the 2nd floor, a small room, a window unit rattling in the corner, filing cabinets that looked older than the building itself. He recognized me before I said a word. "Renee Ashcroft," he said. "I wondered when you'd come by." "You knew," I said. "I recorded it," he said. 9 years ago, this past March. Your grandmother sat right where you're sitting. She told me exactly what she wanted done, and exactly who she thought would eventually need proof of it. He pulled a thick binder from a shelf. Didn't need to search for it. Opened it to a tabbed page. Turned it toward me. "There it is," he said. "Instrument number, recording date, grantor, grantee. All public record. Has been the whole time. Anybody in your family could have looked it up. Nobody ever did." I looked at the page for a long time. My name, typed in the plain serif font of an old record system, sitting in a public book. A book that had been sitting on a public shelf for 9 years, while my mother told me the house was already decided. "Does my mother know this exists?" I asked. "I have no way of knowing what your mother knows," Owen said. "Careful. The way people who work with public records learn to be careful. I can tell you what's recorded. I can't tell you who's read it." I asked him to make me a certified copy. He did it right there. Fed the page through a small machine that stamped it with a raised seal. I asked him what a certified copy was good for, in practical terms. He explained it plainly. It's evidence a court has to take seriously, or a bank, unlike a photocopy, or a claim, or a family argument at a graduation party. What I did next wasn't dramatic. I didn't call my mother. I didn't drive to Derek's house. I put the certified copy in a folder. I drove home. I went to work the next day. Like nothing had happened. Nothing had happened yet that needed a response. I had proof. Proof doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to exist. And to be filed correctly. The same as any claim I process at St. Barnabas. I did have one more question. Owen answered it before I left that first visit, almost an afterthought while he was walking me to the stairs. "There's something else you might want to know," he said. "There's a filing pending on that same parcel. Not recorded yet, just noted as pending. From a regional bank. Something about a pledge of collateral. I can't discuss the terms. That's between the bank and whoever filed it. But the parcel number's the same as your grandmother's deed." I stopped on the landing. Pending from who? The filing lists in Ashcroft Air Solutions LLC, Owen said. I'd guess that's your brother. That was the second gift Dot gave me, without meaning to. Or maybe meaning to exactly. I'll never fully know. She gave me the deed. And now, walking down a set of worn limestone stairs, in a building that smelled like old paper and window unit coolant, I understood something else. My brother was trying to pledge a house he had never owned as collateral for a business loan to a bank that had no idea the collateral wasn't real. This was no longer a story about being left out of an inheritance. This was a story about a fraud that hadn't finished happening yet. And I was, as far as I knew, the only person outside a county records office who could see the whole shape of it. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not Derek, not even a friend at work. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table. I thought about Dot's letter. Don't yell. You were never a yeller. Just go get it in writing. I was already doing that. I just wasn't finished yet. I want to go back to April, right after Dot's funeral. I skipped over some of the hardest weeks of that year too quickly. They deserve to be told properly. Grief is strange when nobody around you seems to be feeling it the same way. My mother cried at the funeral, real tears, I don't doubt that. But by the reception, she was already talking in low voices about the house, about what needed to happen next, about Derek's business, the way you'd talk about a leaking roof that couldn't wait another season. My grief didn't have anywhere to go that week except into the driving. I drove past Coventry Lane 4 times that first week alone. Slow. Just looking. The way you look at a person's face in a photograph after they're gone, trying to hold on to something before it fades. I want to tell you about one of those drives specifically. It's when I first understood how much I'd actually lost. Not just a grandmother, the last person in that family who ever really watched me. I parked across the road from the house on a Wednesday evening, the week after the funeral. Engine off, windows down. An older woman was out walking her dog past the property. Someone I didn't recognize. She slowed near my car, curious, the way small-town neighbors get curious about a stranger parked and staring at nothing. You knew Dot, she said. Not quite a question. She was my grandmother, I said. The woman's face softened. I'm Loretta. Lived 3 houses down for going on 30 years. Dot used to bring me tomatoes from that garden out back, every August, like clockwork. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said. She talked about you, Loretta said. I felt my chest tighten. I'd heard almost that exact sentence from Owen months later, at the graduation party. It would take me until then to understand something. How many people Dot had quietly told about me, in ways I never knew while she was alive. Said you were the one who actually showed up. Said the others showed up when it was convenient, and you showed up when it was Tuesday. I didn't trust myself to say much after that. I thanked her again. She walked on with her dog. I sat in that car for another 20 minutes before I could drive home. I bring this up because it matters to something that happened later, something I haven't told you yet. In May, about 6 weeks after the funeral, Loretta called a number Dot must have given her years earlier, written on a card or scribbled in an address book. She somehow had it. She left me a voicemail I still have saved on my phone. Renee, it's Loretta from Coventry Lane. I don't want to intrude, but I thought you should know. There was a man out at the house yesterday afternoon, taking measurements around the foundation, writing things on a clipboard. Didn't look like your brother. Business-looking fellow. I don't know if that's something you're already aware of, but Dot always said if anything strange happened at that house, I should tell the person who actually cared about it. That's you, dear. Call me back if you want. That voicemail was the first sign, weeks before I even opened the tin box, that something was already moving around that house without my knowledge. I didn't understand it yet. I filed it away, the way I file away everything that doesn't make sense but eventually will. I called Loretta back that same evening. "Do you know anything about who hired him?" I asked her. "No idea, honey," she said. "But I got the county plate off his car, if that's useful to anybody. Wrote it down out of habit. I used to work the front desk at the courthouse years back. Old habits." She gave me the plate number. I didn't know what to do with it yet, not until Owen told me, months later, that it matched a vehicle registered to a survey company. Derek's bank had hired them to confirm the property's boundaries before finalizing an appraisal. Loretta's slip of paper came from nothing but decades-old habit and loyalty to a woman who used to bring her tomatoes. It became one more piece in a folder that eventually held a whole family's undoing. I called Loretta every few weeks after that, not because I needed more information most of the time. She was, without either of us saying it directly, one of the only people left who remembered Dot the way I did. She told me stories I'd never heard. A younger Dot, decades earlier, once caught a door-to-door contractor trying to overcharge an elderly neighbor for roof repairs, marched down the street to correct him personally, receipts in hand, long before either of us had any idea what receipts would eventually mean for me. She was always like that, Loretta said, quiet till she wasn't. Then look out. I thought about that phrase often over the following months. Quiet till she wasn't. It described Dot. It was starting to describe me too, in a way I hadn't consciously chosen, but couldn't deny either. I want to tell you about one more relationship that grew in the shadow of all this. It surprised me the most. Owen and I began meeting for coffee occasionally, not about the case, just as two people who'd both loved the same difficult, careful woman in different ways. He told me things about Dot's life I'd never known. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for the county extension office for 11 years before marrying my grandfather. She'd kept her own household accounts down to the penny her entire life. She'd once told Owen, half joking, that she trusted two things most in this world: a properly recorded deed and a granddaughter who read the fine print. "She saw you clearly," Owen told me, over coffee in early autumn, months after the party, once everything had mostly settled. A lot of people don't get seen clearly by anybody in their whole life. You got it from one person. That's rare, and it's enough. I believed him. I still do. I want to return, briefly, to something my mother said during that difficult phone call in November. The drunk one. I've thought about it often since. It deserves one more mention. She'd asked me why I was punishing them. I'd told her I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just being quiet. That was true, as far as it went. But there was a deeper truth underneath it I didn't say out loud that night. One I only understood fully by the time I sat on that porch step in October, coffee going cold. I wasn't being quiet to punish them. I was being quiet because quiet was the only voice they'd ever actually let me have. Loud got dismissed in that family. Loud got called dramatic, or difficult, or ungrateful. Quiet, backed up with a folder full of dates and documents, was the one register nobody in that family knew how to argue with. Arguing with a document means admitting the document might be right. Dot understood that about her own daughter-in-law and grandson better than anyone. That's why she didn't leave me a speech. She left me a deed and a letter, 4 sentences long. She trusted the quiet to do what 9 years of shouting from anyone else never could have done. I think about that every time I unlock the front door at Coventry Lane now. The same brass lock my grandfather installed in 1961, worn smooth by 6 decades of hands. It still works exactly the way it was built to work. Some things, if you build them carefully enough the first time, never need raising a voice to prove they're real. August moved slow that year. I went to work. I processed claims. I flagged 4 more duplicate charges and 1 miscoded surgery that would have cost a patient $1,100 if nobody caught it. I caught it. That's the job. I did not call my mother. She did not call me. Derek posted a picture online of a new company truck, bright red, with the Ashcroft Air Solutions logo on the door. Captioned, "Growing the business, watch this space." 41 comments. I did not comment. The certified copy of Dot's deed lived in a folder in my apartment. Under it, I started a second folder, labeled Pending, in block letters, the way I label everything at work. Inside went a single page, a printout from the county's online index. It showed the pending filing Owen had mentioned, an Ashcroft Air Solutions LLC pledge of collateral on the Coventry Lane parcel, still not recorded, still waiting on something. I went back to Union Street twice that month, not to make a scene, just to check the index the way I'd check a claim status. Patient, methodical, once a week if I could manage it. The second visit, Owen had something new for me. The bank's underwriting file references an appraisal, he said. Somebody had the house appraised in June. That's not a public record I can hand you. But the appraisal company's name is on the county's contractor list. Rourke and Associates, out of Lexington. Would they talk to me? I can't tell you what to do, Owen said. I can tell you what I'd want to know if I were you. An appraisal means somebody's serious. It means the loan's further along than a phone call. I called Rourke and Associates the next morning, on my lunch break, from the parking lot of St. Barnabas. I didn't lie to them exactly. I told them my name was Renee Ashcroft. I told them I had an ownership interest in a property they may have appraised, and I asked whether an appraisal had been done on a house on Coventry Lane, in June. The woman on the phone put me on hold for 4 minutes. When she came back, she was careful. The way people get careful when they sense something is about to become somebody else's problem. I can confirm an appraisal was completed on that address, she said. I can't share the report with you unless you're a party to the loan or the owner of record. Are you the owner of record? I believe I am, I said. I have a recorded deed. There was a pause. Ma'am, I'd advise you to speak with the lender directly. I'm not able to discuss this further. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat in that parking lot for a while, engine off, air conditioning dying. I thought about how strange it was. A stranger on a phone had just confirmed the shape of the fraud better than my own family ever would, without meaning to. I want to explain something about my mother. I don't want you to think of her as a cartoon villain. She wasn't cruel for sport. She was scared. Scared people build stories to protect themselves from the thing they're scared of. Her story was that the house had always been meant for Derek, because Derek needed it more, because Derek had a family, because Derek's failure would reflect on all of them, in a way my quiet, steady life never would. It was a convenient story. It let her avoid one uncomfortable question. What if the house was never theirs to give away in the first place? I didn't confront her with that question in August. I kept working the problem the way I work every problem. Patiently, mostly alone, mostly on paper. September brought the first real rehook, though I didn't recognize it as one until later. My father called me. Gary almost never called. When he did, it was usually short, and usually about something practical, a leaking gutter, a car that needed an oil change. This call was different. His voice had a strain in it I hadn't heard since the plant closed. Renee, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you not to tell your mother I asked, okay? Do you know anything about the house being used for a loan? Derek's loan? My stomach did something complicated. Why are you asking me that, Dad? Because the bank called here, he said, asking to confirm some things about the property. Ownership things. Your mother told them it was all handled. I don't think it's all handled, Renee. I don't think your mother's told me everything. I sat with the phone against my ear for a long moment. Dot's letter came back to me. Don't yell. Just go get it in writing. Dad, I said, I need you to trust me on something. I can't explain all of it yet, but the house isn't Derek's to offer as collateral. It hasn't been anybody's to offer for 9 years. Not your mother's, not Derek's, not even mine exactly. Not until certain conditions are met. What conditions? I'll tell you when I can show you, not just tell you, I said. I don't want you carrying half of this and worrying yourself sick. Give me some time. He didn't push. That wasn't Gary's way. He'd spent 31 years at a plant where you did your job. You trusted the people above you to have a plan. Some of that trust had transferred without either of us really noticing, onto me. Okay, he said. I trust you. Those 3 words did something to me that Carol's cruelty at the graduation party never managed. They cracked something open, not anger this time, something closer to responsibility. I called Owen the next day. I asked whether there was any way to formally put the world on notice that the Coventry Lane parcel had an existing owner of record, separate from whatever the bank believed. You can request that your deed be indexed as the current owner of record, which it already is, Owen said. But if you want the bank to actually see it, somebody has to send them notice. A title company usually catches this in a normal transaction. A title search would flag your grandmother's deed immediately. I don't know why this bank's search missed it, or if it hasn't gotten that far yet. Could I request my own title search? You could hire a title company yourself, he said. It'll cost you a few $100s, but you'd get a clean, professional document showing the full chain of title. Chain of title's the thing that ends every argument like this one. Not opinions. The chain. I spent $310 of my own savings on that title search. 2 weeks later, it came back exactly the way I expected. Dorothy Ashcroft to Renee Marie Ashcroft, recorded 9 years earlier, reserving a life estate that had ended with Dot's death in March. Clean chain, no competing claims, no liens, just my name, sitting where it had always been sitting, waiting for somebody to look. I put the title search in the folder with everything else. The folder was getting thick now. I'd started keeping it in a fireproof lockbox I bought at the hardware store on Union Street. $42, cash. October brought the confrontation I'd been avoiding, without quite admitting I was avoiding it. Carol called on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice had an edge to it I recognized from childhood. The edge she got right before she said something she'd clearly rehearsed. Renee, I need you to sign something. What something? A quitclaim, she said. For the Coventry Lane house. It's just a formality, the lawyer said, since your name might be on some old paperwork from when your grandmother set things up years ago, before she really understood what she was doing. It doesn't mean anything legally. It's just cleaning things up so Derek's loan can close. There it was. My name on old paperwork, from before Dot really understood what she was doing. My grandmother, sharp until the day she died, reduced in one sentence to a confused old woman who didn't know what her own deed meant. I did not raise my voice. I did not say what I wanted to say. Several things, none of them kind. Send me the quitclaim, I said. I'll look at it. You'll sign it, though, right? This isn't complicated, Renee. It's just paperwork. I said I'll look at it, I said again. This time I let a little more flatness into my voice. The flatness I use at work when a claim is wrong. When the person on the other end is hoping I won't notice. I don't sign anything I haven't read carefully. You know that about me. You're being difficult. I'm being careful, I said. There's a difference. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on my couch for a long time after that. The phone warm in my hand. I felt something shift inside me. quiet and permanent, like a lock turning over. The quitclaim arrived 3 days later, by email from a lawyer named Felt. His signature block listed an office in Lexington. I read it twice. It was exactly what Owen had warned me it might be. A document that, if I signed it, would transfer whatever interest I had in the Coventry Lane property to Derek. Cleanly. Quietly. No reference at all to Dot's recorded deed. No reference to a life estate. Nothing that would ever require anyone to explain why a 9-year-old deed in my name existed in the first place. If I signed it, the fraud would disappear before it ever had to be discovered. Derek's loan would close on time. My mother's fear would go back to sleep. And Dot's deed, the one she'd fought to put in place 9 years earlier, would become nothing more than a curiosity, a folder in an old filing cabinet, overwritten by my own signature. I did not sign it. I called Owen instead. I asked him one more question, the one that had been sitting under everything else. If I never respond to this quitclaim at all, I said, if I just let it sit, unanswered, what happens? Nothing happens, Owen said. Your deed stays exactly as recorded. A quitclaim you never sign has no effect on anything. It's just a piece of paper somebody hoped you'd sign. And if the bank closes the loan anyway, without knowing about the deed? Owen was quiet for a second. Then the bank has a serious problem. And so does whoever told them the collateral was clear. That's not a family matter anymore at that point. That's a fraud matter. Banks don't take kindly to being lied to about collateral, Renee. They have entire departments for exactly that. I thanked him. I hung up. I did not sign the quitclaim. I did not tell my mother I wasn't going to. I let the silence do the work Dot's letter told me it would do. Weeks passed. October slid into November. I kept working, kept flagging errors, kept driving past the Coventry Lane house sometimes on my day off, just to look at it. The brick facade my grandfather built. The porch swing Dot used to sit on with her tea still hanging, a little more weathered every time I passed. Derek's business, as far as I could see from the outside, kept limping along. The red truck with the new logo showed up in 3 more social media posts. A grand reopening was announced for the following spring. A full rebrand, new signage, a ribbon cutting with the mayor. Everything about it announced a man who believed the money was already as good as in the bank. I knew something he didn't. The bridge loan he was counting on had a hole in it the size of a recorded deed. And that hole had my name on it. I want to tell you about the night in November when I almost broke my own rule. It's important you know I was not made of stone through any of this. My mother called again, this time drunker than I'd ever heard her. A Friday night, after what I later learned was a difficult conversation with Derek about the state of his real numbers. You're doing this on purpose, she said. No greeting, straight into it. You're punishing us. For what, Renee? For raising you? For not spoiling you the way we spoiled him? You've always been the one who could handle things on her own. That's a compliment, you know. That's not us loving you less. I sat with the phone against my ear and let her finish. Interrupting her had never once, in 29 years, made a conversation shorter. I'm not punishing anyone, I said when she was done. I'm not doing anything at all, Mom. That's the part you're not hearing. I haven't done a single thing since July. I've just been quiet. Then sign the quitclaim. Make it easy. I don't get loud, I said. I get accurate. And accurate takes as long as it takes. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge, replaced by something that sounded, for just a second, almost afraid. What do you know, Renee? What did that old lawyer of hers tell you? I could have told her everything right then. Part of me wanted to. The part that was still 9 years old, refilling glasses. Hoping that if I explained clearly enough, She'd finally see me the way she saw Derek. I didn't tell her. "Good night, Mom," I said. I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time afterward. I thought about Dot's kitchen table, the 3 piles of mail, the tin box with the faded rooster on the lid. Not yet, I thought. Just a little longer. I want to tell you about one more thing that happened at work that year. It shaped how I finally decided to handle everything with my family. I think you'll understand why once I explain it. In late September, a few weeks after my father's call about the bank, St. Barnabas brought in an outside auditor to review the billing department. A routine compliance check, the kind that happens every few years at hospitals our size. The auditor's name was Marissa Colt. Sharp, no nonsense, a woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of billing shortcut a hospital could invent, and a few they probably hadn't thought of yet. She sat with each of us individually, reviewing our case logs. When she got to mine, she went quiet for a long moment, scrolling back through months of flagged errors, corrected charges, case numbers I'd generated without anyone ever telling me to. "You've caught more errors in 8 months than most of the departments I audit catch in 2 years," she said. "Why aren't you running this department?" "I like the work I do," I said. "I'm not chasing a title." She studied me for a moment, the way people study something they don't often see. "That's rare," she said. "Most people who are this good at something want everyone to know it. You just quietly keep the ledger straight and go home." I thought about that phrase for weeks afterward. Quietly keep the ledger straight and go home. It described my job. It also described exactly what I'd been doing with my own family since July, quietly keeping a ledger straight that nobody else in that family had bothered to check. Marissa's review ended up being part of what pushed Denise to formalize the senior auditor position for me that following February. I didn't know that connection existed until much later. Denise mentioned, almost in passing, that Marissa's final report had specifically named me, an example of the kind of quiet, methodical work the hospital should be rewarding instead of taking for granted. I want to tell you about a smaller moment that November. I almost left it out of this story because it seemed too minor at the time. It turned out to matter quite a bit. I was at the grocery store on Union Street, the one 2 doors down from the diner, picking up a few things after a long shift. I ran into Felt, the lawyer who'd sent me Derek's quitclaim months earlier. I recognized him from the signature block on the email. Apparently, he recognized me too, from a photograph my mother had probably shown him at some point. He stopped his cart near mine in the cereal aisle, of all places, and introduced himself. "Ms. Ashcroft," he said, "I represent your brother in some business matters. I wanted to ask, informally, whether you'd given any more thought to that quitclaim I sent over." My stomach tightened a little, standing there with a gallon of milk in one hand, ambushed in a cereal aisle by a conversation I hadn't chosen to have. But I'd had 4 months of practice by then at staying level, and I used every bit of it. "I've given it a great deal of thought," I said. "I've had it reviewed, in fact, by the recorder's office directly. I'd encourage you to pull the deed yourself before you send me anything else, Mr. Felt. It's a matter of public record." His expression changed, just slightly. The way a person's expression changes when they realize a piece of information they'd been told secondhand might not be the full picture. "I was told the deed was defective," he said. "Something about a life estate technicality." "Whoever told you that was wrong," I said, "or hoping you wouldn't check. I'd check if I were you, before you certify anything else to a bank on my brother's behalf." I didn't wait for his response. I finished my grocery shopping and left. That encounter did something important for me, something I hadn't expected. It was the first time I'd said the truth out loud to someone outside my immediate family, in a normal, unremarkable setting, a grocery store, over a shopping cart, without my voice shaking or my hands trembling. It felt, for the first time since July, less like a secret I was protecting, more like a fact I was simply stating, the same way I'd state a wrong billing code to a supervisor. Plain, documented, not up for debate. I called Owen that evening and told him about the encounter. He was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. Then he said something I've carried with me since. "That's how you'll know you're ready. When it happens," he said. "Not when you feel brave, when it just feels like stating a fact." Bravery is for people still deciding whether the truth is worth the trouble. You already decided that back in July. Everything since then has just been you getting comfortable saying it out loud. He was right. I didn't fully understand how right. Not until that Saturday in March, standing in my parents' backyard with a folder in my hands and 50 people watching. It felt, in the moment it mattered most, exactly the way stating a true and simple fact should feel. Calm, certain, entirely mine. December came in cold that year, colder than usual for Ashford Mills. The Barlow River iced up at the edges. I kept my routine, work in the morning, the folder growing at night, a quiet dinner alone, most nights. I'd stopped inviting people into a story I couldn't fully explain yet. I want to tell you about the letter. It's the hinge everything else turns on. Owen called me on a Wednesday, which was unusual. Our conversations mostly happened in person, at his cluttered desk, the window unit rattling. This time his voice came through the phone careful, a little quicker than usual. "Renee, I think you should come down here," he said. "There's something in the file you need to see with your own eyes." I left work early. I drove to Union Street with my hands tight on the wheel. The way you drive when you already suspect the news is bigger than the drive itself. Owen had a single page waiting on his desk, sitting apart from the binder this time. A letter of intent, on Heritage Regional Bank letterhead, dated 3 weeks earlier. It named Ashcroft Air Solutions, LLC, as borrower. It named the Coventry Lane property as proposed collateral. At the bottom, in a section labeled Borrower Certification, it carried a signature, Derek's signature, under a printed line that read, "Borrower certifies it holds clear, unencumbered title to the collateral described above." "He signed this," I said. "He signed it," Owen said, 3 weeks ago, certifying in writing to a federally regulated bank that he holds clear title to a house he does not own, a house that's been recorded in your name for 9 years. I sat with that for a long moment. This wasn't my mother's fear talking anymore, or a lawyer's convenient quitclaim. This was my brother, in his own hand, telling a bank something he had to know wasn't true. Owen had told me himself back in July that public records don't hide. Derek could have checked. Derek could have called the recorder's office the same afternoon I did. He didn't. Checking would have meant admitting the plan had a hole in it. "What does this mean?" I asked. "In plain terms." "In plain terms," Owen said, "it means your brother made a false statement to obtain financing. Banks call that loan fraud. It doesn't matter that he's your brother. It doesn't matter that your mother pushed for it. It doesn't matter that everybody involved probably told themselves it was just a formality. The bank doesn't see family. The bank sees a signed certification that turned out to be false. Will they find out on their own?" "Eventually," Owen said. "Title searches usually happen before a loan actually funds, not just at the appraisal stage. If nobody produces a competing deed before then, the search will catch it. And it'll catch it in a way that looks a lot worse for your brother. Worse than if the truth came out now, calmly, with you standing there holding the deed, instead of a bank examiner finding it after the money's already moved." That was the second rehook, the one that changed the whole shape of the story for me. Until that letter, this had been a story about being written out of an inheritance. Now it was a story about a man who had already signed his name to a lie, and a clock that was going to run out whether I did anything or not. I took a photograph of the letter with my phone, careful, both hands steady. Owen made me a certified copy of the whole file, the appraisal reference, the pending filing, the letter of intent, everything indexed and dated and stamped. I drove home that night through the cold. For the first time since July, I let myself feel something like anger, not the loud kind, the kind that settles into your chest and stays there, patient, waiting for its moment. I thought about calling my father. I decided against it, not because I didn't trust him. I didn't want to put him in a hard spot, knowing something before it was safe to know it. Gary had enough on his plate, carrying a home equity loan he never should have signed in the first place. I thought about calling my mother, reading her the certification line, word for word. I decided against that too. Dot's letter kept coming back to me. Don't yell. Just go get it in writing. I already had it in writing. What I needed now wasn't a phone call. I needed a room. The invitation came in January, 3 weeks into the new year. An email from Derek, subject line Ashcroft AR Solutions Grand Reopening. Forwarded to the whole family list like we were customers instead of relations. A ribbon cutting at the renovated shop. New signage. A visit from the mayor. Refreshments in the same backyard where the graduation party had happened 7 months earlier. Derek had decided, for reasons that made sense only to him, to hold it at our parents' house instead of his own shop. I read the email twice. Then I called Owen. I want to ask you something, I said. Tell me honestly if it's a strange thing to ask. Go ahead. Would you come to a family event with me? Not as my grandmother's recorder, just as a guest. I can't explain everything yet, but I think something will need to be said out loud that day. I think it should come from someone the family can't accuse of being biased, someone with the actual record in hand. There was a long pause on the line. I half expected him to say no, to tell me public officials don't attend family confrontations. Your grandmother asked me something similar once, he said instead. Not this exact thing, but years ago, she asked if I'd stand up for the truth. If it ever came down to a room full of people who didn't want to hear it, I told her yes. I don't go back on that kind of promise. Not just because the person who asked isn't here to see it through. Thank you, I said, and my voice cracked slightly on the second word, the only time in this whole story it did. Bring the file, Owen said. All of it. Certified copies, not originals. And Renee, one more thing. Whatever happens that day, you don't have to raise your voice. The document does the talking. That's what your grandmother understood. Probably what you understand too. Or you wouldn't have waited this long. I spent the next 6 weeks doing exactly what I'd been doing since July. Working, watching, preparing, saying nothing. I built the folder into something a stranger could follow, without me in the room to explain it. An index page on top. Every document listed in order, dates highlighted. The certification line from Derek's letter underlined in red. I also, for the first time since March, let myself think about Dot, without the sadness swallowing everything else. I thought about her at that kitchen table, sorting her 3 piles of mail, watching her family with a patience I was only now starting to understand. It had never been passive. She'd seen this coming 9 years before it happened. She'd built the fix before the problem even existed. That wasn't luck. That was a woman who paid attention. I started paying that same kind of attention. Deliberately. The way you practice a skill you already have, but want to get better at. I noticed on a Sunday drive past Coventry Lane that someone had mowed the lawn, though the house was supposedly empty and unclaimed. I noticed, scrolling Derek's social media, that he'd started calling it our new location, a full month before any loan had closed. I noticed my mother's tone on the rare calls we still had, a tightness that hadn't been there in October. The sound of a woman keeping a lid on something that wanted very badly to boil over. None of it surprised me. All of it confirmed what I already knew. The house on Coventry Lane was, in my brother's mind and my mother's plans, already spent, already promised, already gone, in every way except the one way that actually mattered under the law. February brought one more piece I hadn't expected. Though in hindsight, I should have. My supervisor at St. Barnabas, Denise, pulled me aside on a Thursday afternoon, near the end of my shift. She told me the hospital's compliance department wanted to talk to me. My stomach dropped for a moment. Old instincts from a childhood spent bracing for blame that was never actually mine. "It's not bad," Denise said, reading my face. "It's the opposite. Compliance wants to formalize what you've been doing informally for 2 years, catching these errors. They want to create a position. Senior claims auditor. It comes with a raise, Renee. A real one. 11,000 a year more than what you're making now." I sat with that for a moment. The good kind of stunned. $11,000 a year, on top of 29 years of being told, in 100 small ways, that competence like mine was expected and never specially rewarded. "I don't know what to say," I told her. "Say yes," Denise said. "You've earned it. You earned it a long time before we noticed." I said yes. It felt strange, receiving something I hadn't had to fight a single family member for, hadn't had to prove myself against a golden child comparison to earn. It was just mine, cleanly, because I was good at the work. I thought about Dot's line in her letter. Being the one I trusted was the gift. I was starting to understand something. Being trusted by a hospital, by a recorder who barely knew me, by my own quiet father. That was worth more than a house I'd never lived in. The house mattered because it was Dot's, because taking it from me was theft dressed up as family business. But the trust was the actual inheritance. Nobody could quit-claim that away from me, no matter what lawyer they hired. The reopening party was set for the second Saturday in March, almost exactly a year after Dot's death. I noticed the date when Derek's calendar invite arrived. I don't think he noticed it himself. Some things you only see if you've spent 2 years driving somebody to appointments, learning to watch a calendar the way other people watch a clock. I packed the folder into a plain leather satchel the week before the party. I called Owen to confirm he'd still come. I did not tell my mother or my father or Derek that anything unusual was going to happen. I let them believe, right up until the day itself, that I was simply attending a family party. The same quiet daughter who always showed up, always refilled the drinks, and never made a single scene. I want to back up for a moment. There's something I haven't told you yet. Something from those 6 weeks between the letter of intent and the party. It matters just as much as anything that happened in that backyard. Once I had the certified copy of Derek's certification letter in hand, I didn't just pack a folder and wait for March. I did one more thing first. It changed everything that came after. I went to see Owen again, a few days after that December letter. One question had been keeping me up at night. "If I show this to the family privately first," I asked him, quietly, before any public event, "is there a chance this gets fixed without anyone getting hurt worse?" Owen considered that for a long moment, the way he considered most things. Slow and careful. "You could try," he said. "But Renee, I've watched families do this dance before. The private conversation usually just buys the person doing wrong more time. A new lawyer, a new argument. Sometimes the kindest thing and the most effective thing is the same thing. A record read where enough people are watching, so nobody can quietly explain it away afterward. I sat with that. I didn't like it. Some part of me still wanted to believe my family would do the right thing if I just handed them the truth in private, gently, the way you'd hand someone bad news about their own health. I tried it anyway. In early February, I asked my mother to meet me for coffee. Just the two of us. The diner on Union Street, the one with the meatloaf special. I brought a copy of the deed, not the whole folder, just the deed, and Dot's letter. She read the deed first, her face unreadable. Then she read the letter. I watched something in her jaw tighten, right at the line about counting me out of a house that was never hers to give away. Your grandmother always did love a dramatic gesture, Carol said finally, sliding the papers back across the table. This doesn't change anything, Renee. Derek needs this house. His whole life is riding on this loan. Are you really going to take that away from your own brother? Over a piece of paper? I'm not taking anything, I said. I'm telling you what's true. The house was never yours to promise him. It's been mine for 9 years. I found out the same way you're finding out right now, from a document, not from anyone in this family telling me the truth. So what do you want? She said. An apology? Money? What will make this go away? That question told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't asking how to fix it. She was asking what price would make me stop being an inconvenience. I don't want anything from you, I said. I want Derek to stop certifying to a bank that he owns something he doesn't own. That's not a negotiation, Mom. That's just what's true. She left the diner without finishing her coffee. She didn't call me for 2 weeks after that. When she finally did in late February, her voice had gone hard and flat. Derek was moving forward with the loan anyway, she said. His lawyer said the old deed was likely defective, some technicality about how life estates work. I should really think carefully, she said, about whether I wanted to be the reason my brother's business failed. I called Owen that same night. I asked him point blank whether a life estate could make a recorded deed defective, the way Felt was claiming. No, Owen said, flat. A life estate is one of the oldest, most well-settled concepts in property law. Your grandmother reserved the right to live in the house until she died. That's it. That's all it does. The remainder interest, the actual ownership that transfers, was yours the moment that deed was recorded. Her death in March didn't create your ownership. It just removed the last condition. Anyone telling your family otherwise is either badly mistaken or hoping nobody checks. They're hoping nobody checks, I said. That's usually the case, Owen said. I want to tell you what that phone call with my mother cost me. I don't think I fully understood it until much later. It wasn't just that she'd tried to talk me out of the truth. It was that she'd offered me money to stop believing my own eyes, the same way you'd pay someone to look away from something inconvenient. I didn't take the money. There wasn't actually a number on the table, just a vague implication that one could appear if I behaved. But the offer told me something I'd spent 29 years not quite letting myself see. My family's love for me had always come with a price tag attached, quietly, in the fine print, and the price was silence. I stopped trying to fix this privately after that call. Here's the small, human moment that made me stop. It wasn't the fraud. It wasn't the money. It was a text message from my nephew Tyler, the graduation boy, now a college freshman. Out of nowhere, on a Tuesday night in late February. Aunt Renee, it read. Dad's been weird lately, stressed about money. Mom keeps saying it'll all be fine once the new location opens. Is everything okay? You always tell me the truth when nobody else will. I read that message 3 times. You always tell me the truth when nobody else will. A 19-year-old had noticed, in one sentence, the exact thing my own parents had spent 29 years failing to notice about me. I wrote back something careful. True, but not the whole truth. Not yet. Things are complicated right now, Tyler. I promise I'll explain everything soon. I promise it'll be the truth, all of it. Just give me a little more time. He wrote back a single word. Okay. Then, a minute later, another message. I trust you. That was the second time in this story someone told me they trusted me. It did the same thing to me both times. It didn't make me angrier. It made me more careful. Trust, I was learning, is not a feeling. It's a responsibility. I intended to earn every bit of it that had been handed to me that year. By my father, by a hospital compliance department, and now by a 19-year-old who'd noticed things his own parents hadn't. That's when I made my decision. Not to bury the truth in another private conversation that would go nowhere. Not to wait for a bank examiner to find it first. And turn my brother's mistake into a criminal referral before anyone in my family had the chance to understand what they'd actually done. I decided to bring the truth into one room. A room where nobody could later claim they hadn't heard it clearly. In front of witnesses who couldn't be talked out of what they'd seen. At the party, my brother himself had chosen to throw in our parents' backyard. 1 year, almost to the week, since Dot had died in that quiet hospice room with the windows open. I thought about that decision every day for the 6 weeks that followed. Right up until the second Saturday in March, warmer than I expected, my leather satchel waiting by the front door. I want to tell you about the week before the party. It wasn't just paperwork and preparation. It was also the week I almost lost my nerve completely, and the week a stranger reminded me why I couldn't. Tuesday, 4 days before the party, I drove past Coventry Lane on my way home from work, the way I'd taken to doing most weeks by then. A car I didn't recognize sat in the driveway, an older sedan with a realtor's magnetic sign on the door, though the house wasn't listed anywhere I could find. I slowed down. A man in a blazer stood on the porch, clipboard in hand, taking photographs of the front facade. I pulled over. I got out of my car. I walked up the cracked front walk my grandfather had poured himself 60 years earlier. I asked the man, as calmly as I could manage, what he was doing. Preliminary photos, he said. Not unfriendly, just busy. For an appraisal update. Bank wants fresh photos before they finalize the loan next month. Do you know who owns this house? I asked. He checked his clipboard. Says here the borrower, an Ashcroft Air Solutions LLC. Why, is there a problem? There's a problem, I said. I own this house. I have a recorded deed. My name is Renee Ashcroft. He lowered his camera slowly. Ma'am, I just take photos. I don't handle ownership disputes. You'd need to talk to the bank directly, or the loan officer listed on the file. I asked him for the loan officer's name. He gave it to me without much thought. A woman named Patricia Hollis at Heritage Regional Bank's Lexington branch. I wrote it down on the back of a grocery receipt from my glove compartment. That's the kind of week it had become. Evidence collected on whatever scrap of paper was closest at hand. I called Patricia Hollis the next morning from the St. Barnabas parking lot, the same spot I'd called the appraisal company from months earlier. I told her exactly what I'd told everyone else. I held a recorded deed to the Coventry Lane property, 9 years old, uncontested. I wanted to know if the bank had reviewed a title search before proceeding with any collateral pledge. Patricia Hollis, unlike the appraisal receptionist, did not put me on hold and come back careful. She went quiet in a different way. The way people go quiet when they realize a mistake is bigger than they first assumed. Can you email me a copy of that deed? She said. Today. if possible. I did that afternoon, along with the certified title search and a short, plain cover note. My name is Renee Ashcroft. I hold recorded title to 214 Coventry Lane, Ashford Mills, Kentucky. Free of any interest by Ashcroft Air Solutions LLC or any of its principals. Please confirm receipt. She confirmed receipt within the hour. She also asked carefully whether I'd speak with the bank's compliance department. What I was describing, if accurate, would be a material misrepresentation on a pending loan file. I said yes. I always say yes to compliance departments. It's a professional courtesy, one auditor to another. Even when the audit in question involves my own brother. That call happened 2 days before the party, a Thursday afternoon. 45 minutes on the phone with a compliance officer named Reggie Okafor. He asked careful, methodical questions. He took careful, methodical notes. The kind of conversation that felt, oddly, like talking to a version of myself who worked in banking instead of hospital billing. Based on what you're describing, Reggie said near the end of the call, and pending our own verification of the deed, this loan will not be permitted to close as structured. I want to be clear, that's not a punishment aimed at your brother personally. It's simply that we cannot lend against collateral the borrower does not own. Will he know today? I asked. That the loan's not closing? Typically, we'd notify the borrower's point of contact within a few business days, Reggie said. Is there a reason timing matters to you specifically? I thought about the party. 2 days away. The banner already ordered. The mayor already confirmed. 50 guests already invited to celebrate a house that was never Derek's to celebrate. No reason, I said. Just curious. I hung up. I sat with something heavy in my chest for a while. Something that wasn't quite guilt, but lived in the same neighborhood as guilt. My brother was about to walk into his own party, not knowing the ground beneath him had already shifted. Some part of me wanted to warn him, call him directly, save him the public embarrassment of finding out in front of 50 people and a reporter. I didn't call him. I want to explain why, honestly. I've turned this decision over many times since. If I warned him privately, he would do what he'd been doing for 8 months. Find a new lawyer, invent a new technicality, buy himself more time to keep pretending the house was his. Private warnings hadn't worked with my mother. They wouldn't work with Derek either. The only thing that had actually stopped the fraud from moving forward at every step was a document landing somewhere it couldn't be argued away, a recorder's binder, a bank's compliance file, and now, in 2 days, a backyard full of witnesses. I thought about Dot's letter one more time that Thursday night. Don't yell, just go get it in writing. I had it in writing. What was left was making sure the writing got read out loud. Once. In a room where nobody could pretend afterward they hadn't heard it. Friday, the day before the party, I called Owen to confirm the details one last time. He asked me gently whether I was certain. Did I want to do this in public, at a celebration, rather than through some quieter legal channel? I've thought about quieter channels for 8 months, I told him. I tried one, in February, with my mother, at a diner. She offered me money to look away. I'm done trying quiet with people who've already shown me what quiet gets me. Fair enough, Owen said. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Bring the folder, bring the certified copies. And Renee, one more thing, for what it's worth. Your grandmother would be proud of how careful you've been through all of this. Not loud. Careful. She always said careful outlasts loud. I thought about that as I packed the satchel Friday night, laying each document in order. The deed first, then Dot's letter, then the title search, then the letter of intent, Derek's signature underlined in red, then the printed confirmation email from Patricia Hollis, then a final page, a summary I'd typed myself. 1 paragraph, plain language, in case anyone in that backyard needed the whole story reduced to something they could read in 30 seconds. I slept better that Friday night than I had in months, not because I was looking forward to what would happen. I wasn't. I loved my brother in the complicated, exhausted way you love someone who has never once had to earn what was handed to him. I loved my mother too, in the way you love someone whose fear you understand even when it hurts you. I slept well because, for the first time since July, I wasn't carrying a secret alone anymore. Owen knew. The bank knew. Reggie Okafor knew. Patricia Hollis knew. The truth had already started moving through the world on its own. Quietly. The way truth does, once enough people have read the same document. All that was left was Saturday. I want to tell you about one more visitor to my apartment that week. She almost talked me out of the whole plan. I think you should know how close I came to listening to her. My coworker Angela, from the billing floor at St. Barnabas, stopped by on the Thursday before the party with a casserole dish. The way people do when they sense you're carrying something heavy, even if you haven't told them what it is. Angela and I had worked side by side for 6 years. She knew me well enough to read the tightness in my shoulders before I'd said a word. "You've been different for months," she said, setting the dish on my kitchen counter. "Quieter than usual, and you're already the quiet one." "What's going on, Renee?" I told her, finally, the whole thing. Start to finish. The tin box, the deed, the letter of intent, the plan for Saturday. It was the first time I'd said all of it out loud to anyone who wasn't Owen or directly involved. Hearing it in my own voice, laid out plainly on my kitchen counter next to a casserole dish, made it feel more real and more frightening than it had in my head. Angela was quiet for a long time after I finished. "That's a lot to carry alone," she said finally. "Are you sure about doing it there? At the party? In front of everyone?" "I've thought about it every other way," I said. Quiet, private, one-on-one. None of it worked. My mother offered me money to look away. My brother's lawyer told me the deed was defective when it isn't. I don't think there's a private room left where the truth actually lands anymore. "What if it just makes them hate you?" Angela asked, gently, not unkindly. "What if you do this, and you lose your whole family over a house?" I thought about that question longer than any other question anyone asked me that entire year. It was the one that scared me the most. It deserved a real answer, not a quick one. "I already lost something," I finally said. "I lost the version of my family where I mattered as much as Derek did." "That happened a long time before this house came into it, Angela. Somewhere around the bus pass and the Honda, if I'm honest. What I'm doing Saturday isn't going to cost me that family. It's just going to make it impossible for them to keep pretending that family was ever equal to begin with." Angela reached across the counter and squeezed my hand, the kind of gesture that doesn't need explaining. "Okay," she said. "Then I hope it goes exactly the way it needs to go. And I hope you call me the second it's over, whatever happens." I did call her, later, from my car in the driveway, the day it finally happened. I'll tell you about that call when I get there. I want to also tell you about a dream I had the night before the party. It stayed with me clearly enough that I think it belongs in this story. I dreamed about Dot's kitchen table, the 3 piles of mail. Except in the dream, the piles kept growing no matter how fast she sorted them. Bills and newsletters and the pile she called "read later," spilling onto the floor around her chair. She looked up at me in the dream and said, plain as anything, "You're better at this than I ever was, honey. I just started it. You're the one who's going to finish it properly." I woke up before I could answer her. I lay there in the dark for a long while, the house quiet around me. I thought about how strange it was, even gone, even a year gone. She still seemed to know exactly what I needed to hear, the night before I needed it most. I got up early that Saturday morning. I made coffee. I sat at my own small kitchen table, nothing like Dot's, just a secondhand table from a thrift store on Union Street. I went through the folder one final time, page by page, the way I'd check a claim before submitting it for final review. Deed, letter, title search, letter of intent, confirmation email, summary page. Everything was there. Everything was true. Everything was dated and stamped, ready to be read out loud. In a backyard that had never once, in 29 years, made room for a truth that inconvenienced my mother. I zipped the satchel closed. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror on my way out the door. Not for vanity, just a habit from years of double-checking myself before walking into a room where I needed to be taken seriously. I looked calm. I felt calm, mostly, underneath a thin layer of nerves that never fully went away until it was over. I thought about Dot's voice from the dream. "You're the one who's going to finish it properly." I locked my apartment door behind me. I drove to my parents' house with the windows cracked, the first real warmth of spring coming through. I did not turn back once, not even when I saw the string lights already glowing faintly against the early afternoon sky as I pulled onto their street. The second Saturday in March came in warmer than I expected, the kind of early spring day that tricks you into thinking winter's already finished with you. I drove to my parents' house with the leather satchel on the passenger seat, the folder inside it, every document indexed, every date highlighted. I felt calmer than I had any right to feel. The backyard looked almost exactly like it had the summer before. New string lights this time, red and white, matching the truck. A banner over the patio read Ashcroft Air Solutions Growing Stronger. A cartoon fan blade logo sat in the corner. Derek had paid a graphic designer $400 to make it. I counted about 50 people this time, more than the graduation party. Derek had invited some of his crew, a couple of vendors, even a reporter from the local paper, there to write up the reopening for the business section. My mother greeted me at the gate with a hug that felt more like an inspection. She looked at the satchel. "What's in the bag?" she said. Light, like it was nothing. "Just some paperwork from work," I said. I didn't have time to drop it home first. She didn't push. She had other things on her mind that day. A caterer to manage, a mayor to flatter, a son to launch back into a business she'd bet the family's stability on. I found Owen near the same fence, by the same crepe myrtle bushes, though they hadn't leafed out yet for the season. He wore the same kind of short-sleeved button shirt, holding a cup of lemonade someone had handed him at the gate. He nodded at me. Small, professional, the way a man nods arriving for any other appointment. "You ready?" he asked. Quiet, just between us. "I've been ready since July," I said. "I want to tell you about the hour before the mayor spoke. It mattered more than I realized at the time." Derek found me near the dessert table, a beer in his hand, his old grin firmly back in place. The grin he wore whenever he believed he'd won something. "Glad you came," he said. "Big day. New location's already got 3 commercial contracts lined up once the financing clears. I told the bank we could close by the end of the month." "That's good," I said. And I meant it, in the specific and complicated way you can mean something good for someone, even while you know it's built on a foundation you're about to remove. "You still sore about the house thing?" he asked, not quite looking at me, poking at a piece of cake on his plate. "Mom said you were being difficult about a quitclaim." I looked at it carefully. I said, "That's all I've ever done, Derek." Looked at things carefully. He laughed, short, a little uncomfortable. "You always were the careful one. I used to think it was annoying, honestly. Now I guess it's paying off for you at that hospital job. Senior auditor," Mom said. "Congratulations, by the way. I meant to say that at Christmas." He hadn't said it at Christmas. I let it go. Thank you, I said. This place is going to be everything, he said, gesturing loosely at the backyard, at the banner, at the whole shape of the afternoon. I know it's been rough for everybody, watching me struggle these last few years. It means a lot, all of you showing up today. It means the family's still behind me. I looked at him for a long moment. My brother, 32 years old, standing in our parents' backyard with a beer in his hand. He had no idea that a compliance officer named Reggie Okafor had already flagged his loan file 2 days earlier. No idea that the collateral he was toasting had never once, in 9 years, belonged to him. I thought about warning him right then, quietly, just the two of us by the dessert table. One last private chance before the mayor's speech made it impossible to keep this small. I didn't. I'd already decided why, back on Thursday night. Nothing about Derek's grin that afternoon changed my reasoning. He needed to hear this from a record, not from me. A record couldn't be argued with the way a sister could. My father found me a few minutes later, quieter than Derek had been, his eyes moving to the satchel and back to my face. "Is this happening today?" he asked, low, just for me. "I think it has to," I said. "I tried quiet, Dad. In February, with Mom. It didn't work." He nodded slowly. "I figured something was coming. Your mother's been strange all week, short with everybody. I think some part of her already knows." "Are you going to be okay?" I asked him. I meant it. Whatever came next was going to land hardest on him, caught between a wife's fear and a daughter's truth. "I've been okay with less than this before," he said. "I lost a job I gave 31 years to, and I was okay. I'll be okay knowing the truth, Renee. I always would rather know." That was the moment, more than any document in my satchel, that told me I was doing the right thing. My father had spent 31 years trusting an employer that eventually let him go with barely a thank you. He deserved, at minimum, a daughter who told him the truth before a bank did. The mayor climbed the back porch steps around noon. He wore a blazer slightly too warm for the weather, a folded note card in one hand. He waited for the crowd to gather near the porch before he began. "Derek," he said, "on behalf of the town of Ashford Mills, I want to congratulate you and your family on this exciting new chapter for Ashcroft Air Solutions." Applause, scattered and warm. Derek beamed. My mother stood a step behind him, glowing, one hand resting on his shoulder. Her champagne glass was already raised halfway, in anticipation of the toast that was coming. "Small businesses are the backbone of a town like ours," the mayor continued, glancing at his note card. "And I understand this expansion is made possible in part through a generous new property investment, securing the company's future for years to come." Property investment. He meant the house. He meant Coventry Lane, sitting 11 miles away, my grandfather's brick two-story, being publicly credited in front of a reporter as the thing making all of this possible. I looked at Owen. He looked back at me and gave the smallest nod, the kind you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. The mayor kept talking, something about ribbon cuttings, job creation, the resilience of local families. I stood very still near the dessert table, my hand resting on the strap of the satchel. I felt the weight of 9 months settle into my shoulders one final time before I let it go. I want to tell you about two more people at that party, before I tell you what happened next. They matter to how the rest of this unfolded. The first was my Aunt Sherry, my mother's older sister, a woman who had watched this family's dynamics for longer than I'd been alive. She rarely said anything about them out loud. She found me near the cooler, refilling a drink I didn't especially want, an old habit that apparently never leaves you, even on the day you're about to change everything. "You look like a woman carrying something heavy," Sherry said. studying my face the way she used to when I was a kid hiding a bad report card. I am, I said. You'll understand in a little while. Your grandmother used to look like that, Sherry said, right before she'd say something that changed the whole room. She had this way of waiting. People always underestimated how long Dot could wait for the right moment. I didn't say anything to that. I just nodded. Sherry patted my arm once gently. Then she walked back toward the patio without asking another question. The way people do when they sense you need silence more than curiosity. The second person was Tyler, my nephew, the one who'd texted me in February. He found me by the fence near Owen. He looked between the two of us with a sharp, uneasy instinct. The instinct of a 19-year-old who already suspects something is wrong before the adults around him admit it. Aunt Renee, he said, quiet. You've got that look. The one from your texts. I told you I'd explain everything soon, I said. Soon is today, Tyler. I'm sorry it has to be at your dad's party. Is this about the house? He asked. I realized with a small jolt that he'd pieced together more than I'd given him credit for. It's about the house, I said, and some other things your dad's been telling people that aren't true. I need you to know, whatever happens in the next few minutes, that none of it is about hurting you. You didn't do anything wrong. You're just standing close to people who did. He nodded slowly, the way kids do when they're trying to look older than they feel. Okay, he said. I trust you. I already told you that. That was the third time in 8 months, counting my father, counting Tyler's first message in February. Someone in this family had said those exact words to me. I trust you. It struck me, standing there by the fence with Owen a few feet away. I had spent 29 years believing my family didn't see me clearly. In the space of one difficult year, 3 of them had told me, unprompted, I was the one person whose word they'd take without question. That was worth more to me in that moment than the house ever could be. I want to say that plainly. I don't want you to think this story is only about a deed. It's about who finally noticed the quiet one in the room and what it cost them to notice too late. I looked back toward the porch. The mayor had reached the top step. My mother had refilled her champagne glass a second time. She stood close to Derek, her hand already rising for the toast she'd rehearsed, I imagine, more than once in front of a bathroom mirror. I thought about Dot one more time before it started. Her kitchen table, the 3 piles of mail, the tin box with the faded rooster. I thought about the words she'd written in that letter, the ones that had carried me through 9 months of silence. Being the one I trusted was the gift. I was about to become, for one backyard full of people, exactly what she'd trusted me to be. The mayor cleared his throat and raised his own glass. The crowd quieted, the way a crowd does when it senses a toast is coming. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died down to a low hush. To Derek Ashcroft, the mayor said, and to Ashcroft Air Solutions, and to the strength of a family that's clearly stood behind him every step of the way. Glasses rose across the yard. Derek's face was flushed with something between pride and relief. My mother's smile had reached its widest point of the entire afternoon. I set the satchel down on the picnic table. I set the satchel down on the picnic table near the dessert spread. I unzipped it. I pulled out the folder. I didn't shout. I didn't wait for a dramatic silence to fall over the crowd. I simply said, in the same flat, clear voice I use at work, before everyone celebrates the new property investment, I think there's something the family should hear. A few heads turned. My mother's smile faltered, just slightly, the way ice cracks before it actually breaks. Renee, she said, a warning in it. Not today. It'll only take a minute, I said. And I think it matters, since the mayor just mentioned the property in front of a reporter. That got more heads turning. Nobody wants to walk away from a sentence that starts with a reporter in it. I opened the folder to the first tabbed page. I held it up, not shouting, just steady. This is a deed, recorded by the Barlow County Recorder's Office 9 years ago. It transfers the house on Coventry Lane from Dorothy Ashcroft to me. It's public record. Anybody here could look it up this afternoon. Derek's smile cracked first. My mother's stayed frozen a beat longer, the way a smile does when the person wearing it hasn't caught up yet to what their face should be doing. That's old paperwork, Derek said, too fast. Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she was in her right mind, Owen said. Every head in that backyard turned toward the quiet man in the short-sleeved shirt by the fence, the one nobody had thought to introduce all afternoon. I'm Owen Castellano. I've been the Barlow County Recorder for over 20 years. I processed that deed personally. Dorothy Ashcroft sat across from me and told me exactly what she wanted and why. She was sharper that day than most people I deal with on a good day. The backyard had gone very quiet. Even the caterer had stopped moving. This doesn't mean anything, Derek said, looking at his lawyer's quitclaim like it was still somehow going to save him. He'd never gotten it back signed. Everyone standing there was about to understand exactly why. It means quite a lot, actually, Owen said, calm, the way a man talks who has done this kind of thing before. In courtrooms, in hearings, in quiet offices where fraud gets caught before it gets to spend anyone's money. It means the house you told your lender you owned free and clear, the house you pledged as collateral for your loan, was never yours to pledge. It's been recorded in your sister's name since before this business ever existed. Derek's face went through several colors in a short span of time. I have the letter of intent, I said. I pulled the second document from the folder, the certification page. Derek's own signature underlined in red at the bottom. You signed this 3 weeks before Christmas. Right here, this line. Borrower certifies it holds clear title to the collateral described above. That's not true, Derek. It's never been true, and I think you knew that. In 8 months, you never once asked me to sign anything that referenced my grandmother's deed by name. You just asked me to sign a quitclaim that made it disappear quietly. The reporter, I noticed, had taken out a small notebook. My mother finally found her voice. Renee, why would you do this here? Today? Couldn't you have told us privately? I tried, I said. For the first time all day, I let a little of the old ache into my voice. Not much, just enough. I told you in October I needed to look at the quitclaim carefully before I signed it. You called me difficult. I told Dad, in September, that the house wasn't Derek's to offer, and I asked for time. I've had this deed since July, Mom. I've had 9 months. I didn't say a word to anyone outside this family until today. And today only because a mayor just told a reporter that a house you don't own paid for this party. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Owen filled the silence, professional, unhurried. For what it's worth, the bank hasn't funded this loan yet. I checked the county index Thursday morning. The pledge is still listed as pending, which means there's still time to correct the record, before this becomes something a regulator has to sort out instead of a family. What happens now? My father asked, quiet, the first words he'd spoken since I arrived. Now, Owen said, your daughter has some decisions to make about her own property. That's between her and whoever she chooses to work with going forward. What I'd recommend, as a matter of public record and not personal opinion, is that everyone here stop treating that house as collateral for anything, starting immediately, before the bank finds out the same way I just told you. Derek sat down heavily in a folding chair near the dessert table, the same kind of chair I'd been compared to a year earlier. He put his face in his hands. My mother's champagne glass, I noticed, was still raised slightly in the air. Forgotten. The toast she'd been about to give for her son's grand reopening, frozen halfway between the table and her lips. It stayed there for a long, strange moment. Then, finally, slowly, she set it down. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was the kind of moment where 50 people stand very still in a backyard, holding paper plates of pulled pork, watching a quiet family truth land in the open air, where it can't be taken back. I closed the folder. I didn't say anything else. I picked up the satchel. I thanked my father for having me. I walked to my car. My hands were shaking the whole drive home. Not from fear, from something closer to relief, finally finding a place to go. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks after. The party wasn't the end. It was only the moment the truth stopped being a secret and started being a set of consequences that moved on their own. Heritage Regional Bank formally denied the loan application the following Tuesday. The letter cited material misrepresentation regarding pledged collateral. Reggie Okafor later confirmed it had gone out to Derek directly. The bridge loan Derek had been counting on to keep Ashcroft Air Solutions alive another 18 months simply stopped existing. Without it, the franchise's existing debt came due faster than Derek could restructure it. He closed the doors of Ashcroft Air Solutions 11 weeks later, in late May. He auctioned off the two company trucks, and what equipment hadn't already been financed to the hilt. The $118,000 in business debt did not disappear. Most of it became my parents' to carry because of the home equity loan they'd co-signed years earlier without telling me. That fact arrived in their mailbox with the cold, procedural indifference of a collections letter. Not a family argument. I did not gloat, though some small, tired part of me wanted to. The part that remembered every graduation party, every Christmas, every bus pass, while Derek got a car. But mostly what I felt, watching my family's finances unravel from a mess they'd built themselves, was something closer to grief. Not for the money. For the years it took all of us to get to a room where the truth finally had to be spoken out loud. I want to tell you about the phone call I made to Angela, the one from my car in the driveway. I promised I would. It's the clearest window I have into what that afternoon actually felt like. From the inside, before I'd had time to smooth it into a story. "It's done," I told her, my voice unsteady in a way it hadn't been all day. I said it. Owen said it. Nobody yelled. My mother just kind of stood there with her glass in the air. "How do you feel?" Angela asked. "Empty," I said. "Not bad empty, just empty. Like I'd been carrying a box for 9 months. I finally set it down and my arms don't know what to do now." "That's called relief," Angela said. "It just doesn't always announce itself right away." She was right, of course. It took about 3 days for the relief to actually arrive. Feeling like relief, instead of just a strange, hollow quiet. That gap surprised me. People sometimes expect the moment of vindication to feel triumphant right away. Mine didn't. It felt mostly like exhaustion with nowhere left to go. I also want to tell you about the county's part in all this. I promised earlier I'd explain the plausible, procedural ending, not just the emotional one. The Barlow County Land Records Office formally noted my grandmother's deed as the controlling instrument. Within a week of the party. A routine administrative confirmation, rather than any dramatic ruling, since the deed had been valid and recorded the entire time. Heritage Regional Bank's compliance department separately referred the matter to their internal fraud review unit. That process took several months. It concluded, according to a letter I received as the property's owner of record, that no further legal action against Derek was being pursued, given the loan's failure to fund and his cooperation once confronted with the certified documents. Some part of me had braced for something harsher: criminal charges, a courtroom, the kind of ending you'd expect from a more dramatic story. That's not what happened. I think that's actually the more honest ending. Most family fraud doesn't end in handcuffs. It ends in ruined credit, a shuttered business, and a family finally forced to have the conversation they'd been avoiding for a decade. That's what happened here. It was enough. I want to tell you one more small thing about Derek. It happened almost a year after the party. It closes a loop I didn't expect to close. He called me in the following February, out of nowhere, on a weeknight. He asked if he could come by Coventry Lane. I said yes, cautious but not unwilling. He arrived carrying a small toolbox, not the leather satchel kind, an actual metal toolbox, the kind our grandfather used to keep in the garage. The gutter on the east side's pulling away from the fascia, he said, standing on the porch, not quite meeting my eyes. I noticed it last time I drove past. I've got the bracket in the truck if you want me to fix it. I let him. We spent an hour together on that porch, mostly quiet. Him up on the ladder, me handing him tools. The kind of easy, wordless cooperation we'd never really had as kids, competing instead for the same small pool of parental attention. When he finished, he climbed down, wiped his hands on his jeans, and looked at the house for a long moment. "Grandpa built a good house," he said. "I used to resent that it went to you instead of just being the family's, I guess. I get it now. It was never going to be fair to split something Dot had already decided. I'm not saying I'm over it completely. I'm saying I understand it. Thank you for the gutter," I said. I didn't quite trust myself to say anything bigger than that. Some repairs, I've learned, matter more in the doing than in the explaining. He nodded, got in his truck, and drove off. I stood on the porch for a while afterward, coffee in hand, watching his taillights disappear down Coventry Lane toward the county road. I think about Dot's letter often, still, even years later. Being the one I trusted was the gift. I used to think that sentence was about her trusting me. I've come to understand it means something wider than that. Trust, once someone finally extends it to you properly, has a way of teaching you how to extend it back. Carefully. To the people who eventually earn it too. One gutter bracket, one honest phone call, one Sunday coffee at a time. I still work at St. Barnabas. I'm still, technically, the person who finds the line that's wrong. I still don't raise my voice. I still get it in writing. Some habits, once they've saved you, are worth keeping exactly as they are. I want to tell you what happened to each of them, one at a time. A story like this only means something if you see where everyone finally landed. Derek moved back in with a friend from high school for a few months after the franchise closed. He took a job installing residential HVAC units for a company he used to compete against. It was humbling work for a man who'd once had his own logo on a truck. I know that because he told me so himself, months later, over coffee. The first honest conversation we'd had in years. "I used to think careful was the same as small," he said that day. "I thought you were just scared to want things. I get it now. You weren't scared. You were just the only one of us who checked the paperwork." I didn't gloat then either. I just nodded and told him I was glad he'd found steady work. I meant it. Whatever he'd done, he was still my brother. Some part of love doesn't turn off just because you finally stop absorbing someone else's mess. My mother took longer to come around. For a few months after the party, she barely spoke to me. She blamed me, in the way scared people often do, for consequences that were never actually mine to cause. It wasn't my signature on that certification letter. It wasn't my decision to co-sign a home equity loan without telling her own daughter it existed. But grief and shame look for the nearest quiet target. I had spent my whole life being the nearest quiet target in that family. The thaw came slowly, the way most real thaws do. She called me in June, 5 months later, not to apologize exactly. She asked haltingly whether I'd help her look over some paperwork of her own, a refinance offer on the house she and my father still owned, one she didn't fully trust and didn't know who else to ask. I read it for her. I found two fees buried in the fine print. They would have cost her $4,000 over the life of the loan. I told her, flat, 4 sentences, the way I tell anyone at work when a number is wrong. "Thank you," she said, quiet, on the other end of the phone, "for looking. And Renee, for what it's worth, I should have looked at things more carefully myself, a long time ago. Starting with you." I didn't need her to say more than that. I'd learned over that long year not to wait for grand apologies. A person showing up with their real questions, finally trusting me with something that mattered, was its own kind of amends. My father, of all of them, changed the least. He'd never really needed to change. He'd trusted me from September onward. He kept trusting me through everything after. In July, on the anniversary of that first graduation party, he drove out to Coventry Lane with me on a Saturday morning. Just the two of us, to look at the house. "Your grandfather built this porch the summer before you were born," he said, running a hand along the railing, weathered but solid. The same porch swing still hanging where Dot used to sit with her tea. He'd be glad to know it stayed in the family the right way. Not the fast way, the right way. I want to tell you about Tyler, too. He mattered more to this story than I expected going in. He started calling me every couple of weeks after that spring, sometimes about nothing, sometimes to ask real questions about money and paperwork, how to read a lease before he signed one for his first off-campus apartment. I taught him what Dot had taught me, without either of us calling it that. Read everything twice. Get it in writing. Never sign something you haven't understood. "You're basically the family's insurance policy," he told me once, laughing. I laughed too, because it was truer than he probably realized. I finished renovating Coventry Lane that fall. I used some of my new auditor's salary and the rest from a small personal loan. Careful, documented, nothing like the loose promises that had almost taken the house from me. I fixed the porch steps. I repainted the shutters the same shade of blue Dot always kept them. I kept the tin recipe box, empty now, its job finished, on the kitchen windowsill, where the morning light hits it first. I moved in that October, into the house my grandfather built with his own hands. The house my grandmother protected with her own quiet planning, 9 years before anyone else in the family understood what she'd done or why. I want to close with the evening I actually moved the last box in. It's the image I keep coming back to whenever anyone asks me how the story ended. It was dusk. The porch light Dot always left on for visitors was working again, replaced with a warmer bulb I'd picked out myself. I sat on the top step with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. The way Dot used to sit with her tea, watching the light change over the fields behind the house. I thought about the graduation party, the lemonade pitcher, the 40 people who looked away. I thought about the tin box and the letter, and Owen standing quietly by a fence for months before anyone understood why he mattered. I thought about my father's 3 words on the phone, Tyler's second text, my mother finally asking me, honestly, to help her read something she didn't trust. None of it had required me to raise my voice. Not once, from July to March to the long, patient months after. I never yelled, I never begged. I just found the line that was wrong. I got it in writing, the same as I'd always done, the same as Dot taught me, without ever once calling it a lesson. I set my coffee cup down on the porch railing, cold now, untouched for the last 20 minutes. The evening had gone quiet, the way Coventry Lane always goes quiet. Just crickets starting up somewhere past the tree line. The house behind me, finally, fully mine. I never raised my voice. I just stopped correcting a bill that was never mine to pay.